All right. So, hi everybody. I'm Mark, the lender Abramovich. Not to be confused with any other Mark Abramoviches. And this is a project analyzer for buy and hold. So, this is to allow you to analyze a property uh, based on what you're paying for it and what the numbers specifically for the property will be. So, this gives you an opportunity to see what your first year cash on cash is, as well as then start projecting it out to see what will happen. Now, the numbers plugged in right now are for a single unit at 51,000. This is an actual property that I purchased um, out of my IRA, and we can run through and see the comparison. Now, additionally, there's a second tab that is the summary for both cash and loan options. So if you had a financed versus cash. So enter the yellow fields. So we've got, city, basically the address of the property, square footage. Not that it's vital to have the square footage, but it does nicely give you the price per square foot. So just to easily be able to see it. Number of units, actually this should be yellow. Number of units is 1 in this particular case, and which then produces the price per unit value right here. So market cap and cap rate. So market cap, you would need to be the one to enter it. And this, so the market cap basically tells you what the price is. The best analogy I had for market cap versus cap rate for a property is if you go to two different stores, and in one store, the same object, let's say you're buying knives. That's literally the example given, right? If you go to Costco versus Saks Fifth Avenue, right? You're buying a set of knives in Costco for half the price of what you're paying in Saks Fifth Avenue. Well, Saks Fifth Avenue, right? That's what tells you what the market cap is. And then you've got the individual price of the item, right? So just the cap rate on its own doesn't really give you the necessary information. You need to know the market cap as well to be able to compare apples to apples, right? Are you overpaying or are you underpaying for the asset relative to the market? The purchase price in this case is 51,000. Value of the land is 10%. So, right, when you're buying, some amount is actually valuation of the land, and this plays a part with depreciation for tax purposes, right? So you can't depreciate the land. You can only depreciate the asset itself, the building that's on the land. So going through some things, quick numbers spat out, gross rent multiplier, the net income multiplier. I'm a big so I own rentals, and my approach is actually not market cap rates or cap rates at all. I'm a big proponent of cash on cash return. That's what's vital to me. Okay. Um, I want to know that I put in X amount of dollars and I'm getting X amount of percent return on my money every month or every year. To me, that's most important. So when we go through, there's property information here, right? So how much you're buying it for, cap rates, square footage. Then down here, we have buying costs. So buying costs are things like an appraisal, right? So when you're buying a property, you're going to have to pay for an appraisal. You might want to have your own inspector come out and take a look at it. You're going to have closing costs, right? So title report, the actual signing of the documents at an attorney's office, the good old days, uh, actually going there to sign, right? So they're letting you sign there and they're charging you for it. So these are the fees that have to do with the transaction. This is not lender specific. This is just what's rolled into what we know as closing costs. So let's say on this $51,000 transaction, the closing costs come out to be, let's say 2,700 bucks, 2,782.50 to be specific. Then you get to the lender financing if you're going to have it. So the preset here is it's a 30-year calculator. Actually, it doesn't really matter, but you enter the amount of months that the loan is for, amount of points if you're going to be buying down the rate. It could be 0, it could be 2, and an interest rate here, right? So this loan right now is set for 70% of purchase, 5.9%, 360 months to make payments, with 2 points, 995 legal, and $250 of miscellaneous fees. It's irrelevant. You can adjust it however you need it, just that this is where you're seeing what the lender is costing you, right? The individual lender. And this is where you're seeing the individual buying costs. And then you scroll down and we get to the meat and potatoes of the actual property itself. So we have the gross scheduled net rent, right? 750 annualized. You have a vacancy of let's say 8%. It's not that high for my property. Just it could be whatever you want it to be. So let's leave it at 8. So that's and it subtracts out here. And then you run through and all of these different yellow fields that you have for legal costs, if there's any, advertising, cleaning, miscellaneous fees of any kind, insurance, right? What else? Property management. So property management is set in percent. And depending on the company you're dealing with, it's 10% is pretty reasonable. And what you should watch out for is some property management companies will nickel and dime you. So you're coming in saying, let's say, oh, management is 6%. But on top of that management, start up all of the fees, right? To inspect the property, well, we're going to charge you. You're having any work done at the property, we're going to be upcharging. So whatever whatever the rehab or repair cost is, let's say a plumber comes out, plumber's charging you $100. What some management companies will do is they'll upcharge on the fees, right? So they'll say, okay, we're charging 10% off of whatever the repair bill is. So that $100 on top of it, $10 goes to the management company. So just be aware that just because somebody offers a cheaper percentage doesn't mean it's going to be cheaper in the long run. They might start nickel and diming. So you want to find out the entire structure. So then we run through, we've got property taxes, water, sewer, electricity. So for a single unit, I'm not paying for water, sewer, electricity, any of that stuff. It's all on the tenant. But with multifamilies, you typically water is on the landlord. Now, there are companies that specialize in their businesses to put in net metering or split up the metering so that you can actually charge it back to the tenants. But in my case, the buildings that I own, we pay for sewer and water. So that's part of our fees that, we charge rent and then we're paying for water and sewer. Repairs and maintenance. So repairs and maintenance, you have the minor stuff and then you've got capital expenditure. And 10% in my opinion is sufficient to cover both CapEx and smaller stuff. And what do I mean by that? So the minor stuff is, you have a small leak, you have to come in, you repair a leaky toilet kind of thing, right? Or toilet gets clogged up, you're calling, you have to get somebody in, you're not necessarily charging the tenant, you're paying for it. That's the minor stuff. Capital expenditure is, I had a building that was built quite a while ago and it's a 6-family and 6 water heaters, right? So I've got individual water heaters in the basement for every one of the units. Well, 3 of those water heaters died within about a month of each other. Why? I mean, which is pretty consistent, actually. I have to give them credit, right? 6 units put in at the same time, 3 of them dying at the same time. That's pretty good. But the point is, that's a capital expenditure, right? Heating units, water heaters, roof. So you're not spending that every month. You're not spending it even every year, but you should account for it that sooner or later, that time is going to come when you need to take care of things. So I think 10% is a good number to put in.
Hey, Mark.
Yep.
So you just estimate that 10%. Now, have you based that on like past years over all of your properties, or
Yes.
how did you come up to the 10%?
That's
Okay.
actually how I have it. It's 10%. Basically, we run. So first of all, when I buy a property, I'll set aside 2 months immediately.
Yep.
Day one, when I buy it, I set aside 2 months. On top of it, then I set aside 10% for repairs and maintenance because I know that there will be small stuff, right? Whether it's exterminators, whether it's whatever it is, there's going to be minor stuff that's going to eat up about 5% of the repair of the rent as maintenance. And then the other 5% just keeps accruing month after month after month, so that when the water heaters died, I didn't care. It
Yeah.
didn't affect me one way or another. I had the money already set aside in the account, and that was it. So I don't care about, I'm not that I don't care. I'm not nervous about, I'm not worried about expenditures when they come up because I've got the money set aside.
Good.
So we keep going through, down here. And so once we have all of our expenses set up, you've got your gross operating income. So this is the income minus, so gross rents minus vacancy. Now vacancy comes in two forms. Vacancy comes in the form of economic and physical. Physical is you literally don't have a tenant in the place, you need a tenant it up, you're looking for a tenant. Economic vacancy is when somebody's living there and they're not paying you rent. And sometimes that could be a lot worse. Then we have total operating expense, right? So this is the total for all of these items that get totaled up, except for the vacancy. So these are the actual expenses that you need to pay for during the year. And then we've got net operating income. So net operating income is the gross rent minus everything else. Basically, it's minus vacancy, minus expenses. So you've got your net operating income. So this property is, its net operating income is 4809 for the year. And then you have mortgage payments. So right here, you've got the annual mortgage payments made of 2541 for the year. And after the mortgage, and as I said, see, some people will go for cap rates. So this is your actual, this is where you're calculating the cap rate. In my case, I don't care what the cap is. Because I'm going to be doing debt service, right? I've got a mortgage to pay. To me, it's more important to know how much I'm keeping after the mortgage, because that's my actual real cash flow. And that's what we have here, these two fields. It's the 2268 for the year, which comes out to be a cash on cash return pre-tax of 11.32%. And I look for a double-digit return. And that's, and why I say it's, and why it's important to me to know pre-tax, because everybody's tax scenario is individual, right? My tax situation, how much I pay in taxes, is different than yours. So to me, these are the numbers I'm interested in seeing right here. Afterwards, you have all of the other stuff, expense ratio, you see the depreciation effect of, right, so the property minus the 10% of the land. So you end up with that having an effect. Here's your depreciation being calculated out, mortgage interest, however it affects it, and you end up with a, so if your tax bracket is 28%, right, capital gains of 28%, you end up with a return with a cash on cash return after taxes of 1,800, which is just about 9%, right? A little bit over 9%.
Mark,
Yep.
real quick.
Yeah, sure.
So is your the mortgage factoring, is that all with everything escrowed in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, at least it should be. But then again, when you're using this analyzer, if you're getting a quote from a mortgage broker, right, or whoever you're getting your financing quote from, you can compare the numbers just to make sure. But it should be. It should be everything.
And last question, going up a little bit, how do you?
If
You're just gonna jump in there, Adam? There's no.
no, go ahead. Sorry.
It's got no Zoom etiquette. Who sets the cap rate? Like you were talking about Saks Fifth Avenue.
Yep.
Like in that analogy, Saks sets the cap rate. Who sets the cap rate in this?
Jesse. I'm not kidding. Actually, that's as accurate an answer as, yes, that's for real. That's market cap rates are set by, Essentially, you find out what's going on in your specific market, and
Yeah.
you're going to find that information out from a broker. They're going to be the ones who tell you what the local cap rate is in this market, right? If in Jesse's market the cap rate is 7%, it's 7%, and that's the sandbox everybody's playing in.
So is there a benefit for somebody like Jesse to either lower or, you know, or increase that number?
Well, he can't change it artificially for the market. What
Yeah.
happens is when the property is being sold, you're trying to sell it. I mean, obviously, you're trying to buy it at a discount to the market cap.
Yes, that's what
And
I'm saying.
obviously, the person who's selling it is trying to sell it over the market cap
Which
rate.
is why if that cap went up and down, it would be in
Mhm.
other people's interests. So,
Right.
but you're saying that that's a the on one hand, I'm hearing that that's like a kind of a rigid or concrete number, and on the other hand, I'm hearing like Jesse affects that. So,
Not that
um,
he affects it, but he's going to know what the local market cap rate is, right? That's
okay,
his business to know. Well, let's
gotcha.
put it that way, right? As a broker, that's his business to know now what the market cap rates are, and it's his business to tell you as an investor if you're completely unrealistic with the price you're trying to pay. And
Gotcha.
it's also his job to tell the seller when they're completely unrealistic, when they're trying to overshoot that number as well,
Understood.
right?
Cool. Thank you.
And of course. So essentially, once we've gotten through this 1 year, right? So this is a 1 year analysis. It doesn't incorporate, we'll talk about how to incorporate renovations if you need to do them into this, but essentially, this is your 1 year analysis, and it tells you what your return is with a mortgage on the property. Now, what I did is in the summary, you can actually go into it, and this calculates out the cash on cash return if there's no mortgage. So you can actually compare side by side what your numbers are doing based on whether it's cash only or with financing on it, and whether financing is improving it or hurting the returns. And that's pretty much it for the analysis, right? This is what I would buy a property on. This is how I analyze it, and this is what I look at. Now, the further part down the page is 5-year operating projections. And what this would allow you to do is set the different escalators here, right? What By what percentage are things growing year over year, and how it's affecting your return. Again, I don't care about cap rate, right? I don't eat cap rate. I eat the return on my cash.
Hey
Right?
Mark,
Yeah.
when you're analyzing properties prior to
Mhm.
purchasing them, what kind of rate of return are you? What's your low end
So my personal metric is 10
after tax?
on a cash. I look at pre-tax only. So I look at it this way. I will set it to be no leverage. I want to know that I'm buying for cash at 10% cash on cash.
Okay.
That's my personal metric. Now, the reason that is because typically when I put a mortgage on a property and I'm leveraging it, it's typically positive leverage. So I know that my return will only be higher after that, not lower.
What types of properties do you generally look for? I mean, like as far as like age, general upkeep and stuff
I
like that. I mean, what do you have a certain type of property that you generally like?
Multifamilies. It was never about the age of the property. I mean, your market will dictate age of property, right? In Connecticut, where I am, and specifically Bridgeport, Connecticut, brand new construction of 6-unit properties is not easy to come by. That's not the market. In my case, my properties are older, multifamilies. I have a 6, a 5, and a 3. That's there. Now, I also own 2 half duplexes, right? One side of a duplex in North Carolina out of my IRA. And why I went to North Carolina is because it's a different market, and because I can buy a property there for $51,000, and my IRA had enough money to buy it cash outright without needing a loan on it. And because I was doing it through my IRA, I couldn't get a loan on it in the first place because there's a whole, when you're buying out of a retirement account, the bank can't come after you personally. So because of it, you have to do what's called a non-recourse loan. And a non-recourse loan, typically banks will do it to about 50 to 60% of the value.
Okay.
And because I was buying for about $51,000, 50,000, the 50% of it is 25K. They don't want to play in that shallow pool. Okay. So because of it, I just bought them cash outright, 2 properties, and that's it. But predominantly, I'm a big fan of multifamilies because the foundation is the same, the roof is the same, but it's carried by more than one unit. A single family, while I understand it, and I know there's a lot of people that deal in the single family market and they have their own reasons for it. With a single family, the moment you have a vacancy, it's 100% vacancy. The tenant is carrying that entire property, right? The HVAC system goes or the roof blows off. There's insurance for that, but any damage is carried by one tenant, right? Anything happens to the foundation, it's one tenant versus a 6-family building where 6 apartments are carrying that same expense. So I'm a fan of multifamily. So in the calculator, these are your escalators. This is the stuff that allows you to adjust what happens year over year. So rent is set to 3%. That's not going to be happening in the next year or two. Vacancy, advertising. Now, vacancy also is an interesting thing right now because vacancy might accelerate in the next year as people don't have money to pay, as there's forgivens, forbearance, deferrals. All of that stuff put together right now is going to create a question of what's going to happen right over the next, let's say, 5 years with a property. But you can use this calculator to plug in those numbers and see how it affects, right? If your repairs and maintenance stay consistent at 10% per year, or are you accelerating them? Is there an increase, right? So actually this number, in my opinion, should probably stay 0 at 10%. And as your rents go up, this automatically goes up as well with them. As you're increasing rents, right? 10% keeps, it's 10% of whatever the rent is. So as the rent goes up, that 10%, the absolute dollars keep increasing as well. And then the last line here is appreciation schedule. So it's appreciation of the property. Now, here's another thing. I never cared. For rental properties, I personally don't care about appreciation whatsoever. I care about cash flow. Again, appreciation is a cherry on the top, right? It's great if it appreciates, but guess what? You don't care if it depreciates. Your tenants are still paying you the same amount every single month, month over month, regardless of the value of the property. So appreciation to me is irrelevant, but you can see it here because if you do sell the property in, let's say, 5 years and it's been appreciating at 1% every year, well, guess what? You're selling it for an extra, $1,500, right? So on top of the cash flow that you've enjoyed for 5 years, you're picking up an extra $1,500 in appreciation minus all of the expenses, right? So there's a little bit of a bonus there. And that's the sizer. I mean, that's it. We can play a little bit with the numbers. We can change this around, leverage of, let's say, typical bank financing will go up to, used to go up to about 80%, right? So you can see how that adjusts the numbers, and cash on cash jumped up to 12.6% from 11 and change.
Mark, would you mind if I jumped in real quick and just?
Nope, I'm done. So
Pat, here's one thing that's important to understand. Generally, single-family homes are lumped in with duplexes and triplexes in regards to both loan type and how they're valued. Sometimes triplexes can get valued like quadplexes and above, but starting at fourplexes and moving up from there, they're valued exactly one way, and that is their rents divided by the cap rate to give you like a total value. So that's where the cap rate comes into play. So there's 2 different strategies subdermally from even what the cash flows would be. You buy single family homes and they are thought to be more liquid because they appeal to 100% of Americans, whereas multifamily, when you go to sell that, appeals to maybe 1.5% of Americans. So there's a liquidity aspect too multifamily has been a good tool for people to do very minor things, do some economic things, make the profit and loss statement better, and then they can flip it because it's divided by that regional cap rate. So you could add 6 figures in value to $1 million building just by making some cost adjustments and increasing rents. Whereas with a single family home, the name of the game is usually paying down debt and building up like an equity cash out for later on. Whenever you snap your fingers, you can sell that house and have that cash.
Yeah.
So there's a couple different strategies aside from this valuation strategy as well, that might make it, the right choice for you, or you might go a different way than Mark. Everybody seems to have their own goals. Some people defer all their cash now, like Adam, and they're building up a large number of quantitative equity to collateralize larger projects later on.
Hey, real quick. So when you're talking like leases and things like that, when you're renting these out, is there is it different for every property? Are you talking 1, 3, 5 year leases? Like what do you normally do in terms of those kind of renter agreements? Are there incentives for people to stay on longer? Everybody the same? I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts.
Well, the longer the lease we can get, the better. But realistically, my leases are running about 1 to 2 years. That's just us, right? It's 1 to 2 years. Obviously, turnover always hurts you. Realistically, turnover hurts, right? Vacancy is just not a good thing. You have to paint. You have to, touch the apartment. You're missing rent here and there. It's not good.
Which is why you're talking about the multi-units
Yep.
as being kind of a hedge against anything like that.
Correct.
So the 1 to 2 year, that's something that you decide that was best for you, or is that a decision that was based on what people are wanting when they rent?
In our case, people are wanting, and yeah. I mean, look, if somebody would sign a 5-year lease with me, that's great, but I don't think anybody really would. It's not practical or practiced by them. So,
Hey, Mark, when you say 1 to 2 years, are you saying that's your average, or do you generally start with a 1 year lease and then go month to month, or do you do a 1 year lease and then make them sign another year at the conclusion, or where are you at with that stuff?
typically we offer 1 to 2 years. They'll sign whatever they want to sign, whether it's 1 or 2 years, and then it's just renewing every year. And we don't crank up prices, right? We don't jump on the increases to. I don't think our market would support it. We don't squeeze out the increases. The only time we've maxed out an increase was on a tenant we really didn't want to keep. And it was
Sure.
kind of the maximum we were allowed to do was 8% in 1 year. And we did it just because we didn't want them to stay. And we figured, all right, if they're going to pay 8% on, an 8% increase, we'll tolerate it.
Sure.
So,
But
yeah.
you do have them re-sign another year
Of
each
course.
time their
Oh,
lease
yeah.
is up. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I had always done that. My father has a ton of rentals, and he's always gone by the adage that if you go month to month after the first lease is up, he said he thinks people stay long. And I disagree with him. His success, somebody's at. No,
Adam, your
where
sound's
anybody else
going out. Am I
stands
the
on that.
only
And
one
that's why
not?
I'm asking.
No, I heard him too. Like he cut out for a second. Your father's thinking is to go month to month after the lease is up, and then what? What was the part after that?
He said he generally has the best luck with longevity of the tenant staying if he goes month to month after the first year. And I said, I disagree, but I'm also not going to argue with the success he's had. So I
Right.
don't know where anybody else stands on that.
Is that it probably depends on the tenant,
Yep,
right?
I would agree.
The tenant and the market climate of
Maybe.
what tenant expectations are in general.
But I mean, he's had some tenants for like 30 years. I mean, crazy stuff. Like they've paid his building off.
Right.
I don't even understand it. But I
You
mean,
need
if it
some of
works-
those,
if-
Mark.
Yeah.
If it works for him, it works for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. So, okay. Well, I'm just checking what your philosophy is on that. So,
Right. Listen, the longer they'll stay, the better it is. We just
oh
typically
yeah,
have a, mostly it's a 1 year lease, but we just re-sign it and keep going. And yeah.
that's what I do.
I wrote down 2 questions for you. Would
Sure.
you mind if I ask them?
Of course.
So the first one is, when considering a management company, do you ever factor in perhaps one management company is more expensive and nickel and dimes more, but they do have a better leasing reputation? Do you factor in their leasing reputation into it, especially with multifamily?
I don't have an answer for you because we are the management company. So that's actually
Triple
one of
dip,
the
Mark.
reasons I was in Connecticut. I mean, you've met Craig. So
Yes,
Craig
yeah,
actually
yes.
handles the management day to day. He was already operating there. We partnered up and we are the management company, right?
Okay.
So I don't have an answer.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
My second question is,
Mhm.
when you're looking to expand in your current market, or when you're looking into a new market, do you ever contact agents and ask about average vacancy durations and factor that into your analysis?
Property managers, not the agents, property managers.
Okay,
Yes.
good to know.
So when I was expanding, when I went to North Carolina, that's exactly the conversation I had there. The real vacancy I have in North Carolina is more like 3%, actually maybe even less. It's just in the sizer, it was set at 8. But that was a huge critical component, right? To find out what the real vacancy is, and that is a property management question. Property management company will tell you what it is. Now, for example, I know that in Bridgeport, it's higher than 4%, right? It's more like 8 to 10.
Especially economic vacancy, I would say.
Yeah. But I'll give you a tip. The one thing that severely altered, now this is a state legislated thing, so you have to check what your state allows. But the one thing that severely improved, greatly improved tenant quality was changing the security deposit from 1 month to 2. That one change had a massive effect.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, people wouldn't be able to afford it. So you just do a first and last month.
I don't call it first and last. It's 2 months of security.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Then they can't use it as their last month's payment.
Right. No.
Makes sense.
Purely security. It's purely security. And what it does is there's a couple of things. First of all, you're holding on to a lot more cash. They're more
Yep.
cautious. On top of it, also a person that's capable of coming up with 2 months, they're in a better financial position.
That's a tenant
That's
you
a
want.
screening, right? That's a better, right there, you're screening easier.
Yeah.
And do you have to maintain a ledger or a separate account for the deposits?
Yes.
Yes to
Yeah.
both?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you do. And it's by state of what exactly you have to do. But yes, it has to be separated. You cannot mingle it with everything else. There needs to be a ledger of it. You have to check on guidance of like interest rates or whatever, whether you have to collect interest on it or not, things like that.
I was going to ask you, do you return interest on the security deposits you hold?
I don't have interest collecting on it in the first place, truthfully. We just have, we
So
have them
it's
sitting
not
in a
like
bank.
a savings account?
No.
Huh.
All right, Mark, you were saying
Mhm.
before you wanted to walk through a new example, a fresh example. and take us
Sure.
down the bottom.
If you have a specific one you would like me to go through,
Well, let's.
I can
If
do
you
it.
don't mind, can perhaps Adam walk you through the typical transaction details of a property in Carlisle, since that's been the subject of our conversation?
Sure.
Adam, would you mind
Absolutely.
collaborating with Mark on this example?
Starting where, Jess?
Starting
Purchase
first at
price.
purchase price, and then what the local lenders are doing, 70, 75 LTV, that kind of stuff.
So, I mean, it varies on the amount of units, like you talked about earlier.
Give me any you want.
Well,
I mean,
no,
listen,
you can
pick
literally
a
build the
typical
scenario
example
with
you've
Mark.
had. Yeah.
So just say you purchase, like a 3-unit, triplex, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
So, just
how
use
much?
the one that I did for an example. I went in and bought one for $260.
Okay.
You had your closing cost.
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember what it was, to be honest with you. It's been a while.
Yeah,
I mean, you could ballpark it, just say,
4,300.
yeah, I was going to say probably 5. I was just going to use a round number, but yeah, just say 4,500 or something like that.
Okay. It's there.
Let's see, what else are we looking at?
What LTV did you get?
I didn't pay anything to the realtor because there was none. I bought it from the lady herself.
But
Let's add in a realtor fee and
well,
a realistic LTV just for argument's sake.
but
Yeah.
realtors are typically actually realtors are in the sale, not the purchase.
Yeah, very
You're
true.
not actually paying. So let's. What did you get for leverage? What did you end up with? 75% of purchase, 80,
I did it at 80%.
80%. So 80%. What was the interest rate?
For this one was 4.4 for 5 years, and then I have to
And then it balloons.
I have to go back then and refinance it, as a traditional mortgage.
What was the amortization?
Uh,
What was the amortization
it's 20,
period?
it's 20 years from the start.
20 years, so
Mhm.
40. Okay. And we'll see, probably 0 points.
0 points, correct.
Okay. So I'm guessing the lender had still their own legal attorney. I mean, we're close enough.
Yeah, it's getting you close anyhow.
Okay. And then let's look at what your rents were.
I would have to add them up. Give me 1 second here in my head.
Okay.
33.50 a month.
And vacancy, I'm guessing it's not 8.
It's nearly 0. I mean, for the last couple of years, it's been 0.
Okay.
But I mean, you can't say 0. So probably, do something very low, 3% or something. I don't know.
Okay. Sure. So advertising, no. Cleaning, probably no. We're going to say miscellaneous for now. No, we'll get back to that. What do you pay for insurance?
It's expensive. Give me a second. I'm thinking.
Sure.
It's around $1,000 a year. I want to say 1,100 maybe.
That's not expensive. Okay. So let's say property. What's your property management? Are you self-managing or do you have a company?
I'm self-managed.
Okay. Now, here's another suggestion. When you're analyzing a deal, analyze it with some kind of property management factored in. And if nothing else, you're pocketing that money.
Sure.
Right? But at least you account for it, because if anything happens and you do need to go to property management, you don't want to be out that cash.
Yeah.
So, okay. Property taxes?
Property taxes are $6,200 a year.
Yeah.
Something like that. That's the one that kicks you.
That's the painful,
balls.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I have that in Connecticut as well.
It's terrible.
So
sewer water kills me too. So there I'm
5%?
doing about $400 a quarter. So just say, it's $1,200 give or take.
Okay. So
Wait, no, that's wrong. Per quarter. I'm sorry, $1,600 give or take.
Right. Wait, 1,600 per quarter? No, 400
No,
bucks. Yeah, so there you
total
go.
for the year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there you go. 4%.
Yeah.
Okay. Repairs and maintenance.
The repairs and maintenance aren't as huge as the things that I do to increase the value of the property and make it look better.
Okay.
So I'd have to look at repairs and maintenance, to be honest with you. What's a round number that we could throw in?
Well, I have it set at 10% just so that you can account for setting it aside. But here's the beauty. Fine. Do you see the numbers already?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's doing pretty well.
I love how people understate things. It's pretty good. 18%, pretty good.
Don't get me wrong. I put a lot of money into it out of my own pocket just to make the place better, but it's not things I would have to do per se.
Okay, I believe it. But then also here we have repairs and maintenance at 10% right now,
which is probably high. Yeah.
Right. So you're saving there. Now let me just throw in one thing to see what that does. So I have to say, even if you were to set aside 10% for property management for yourself, literally as your income off of this, still a healthy return.
Yeah.
So
can I ask you a quick question while we're on this?
Of course.
So you talked about your cash on cash return. You factor into that like the equity that you're building, or is that strictly like cash that you can pocket or invest?
Yep.
Okay. And that's where I would be at a loss to what you're doing. I don't do that, and I probably should.
I will explain why. Everything else is cherries on the top. That's why. Depreciation is fantastic on your taxes every year, right?
Yep.
But it's a cherry on top. right? Depending on what your tax scenario is, it could be wonderful, it could be nothing.
Yeah.
Appreciation. Appreciation is wonderful, except that you can't touch it until you either refinance a property or sell it, right? So you can't touch it either. You can't eat it. You can't do anything with it.
That's fair.
Same thing with mortgage pay down, right? It's a wonderful thing. And there is mortgage pay down on this. Let's not forget that the tenants are paying your mortgage as well, right? Which is, again, wonderful, except that same thing. You can't touch it until you refinance or you sell. The only thing you're touching day in and day, or actually I should say month in and month out, is your cash on cash return. That's why it's so vital to me, because I know that if my cash on cash is good, everything else is going to be even better, right? All of those other things.
One of the things we've been discussing is our total economic return, meaning the cash on cash plus your pay down on the note plus appreciation.
Yep.
Do you have anywhere on this tool that would calculate that number out?
Nope.
Okay.
I do not.
So Mark, I mean, I know what you're saying, and I totally understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it. I probably have a flawed system myself. I guess my question is, so I can use the equity, I can leverage that when I purchase other properties. So do you not, I mean, you don't consider that being able to eat?
Well, in order to leverage the equity when you're buying another property, how do you do it?
Well, like I didn't put any money down on this property whatsoever. I used the other one as collateral.
You use the other one as collateral.
Correct. So I had more than 80-20, the ratio, and the bank says, okay, well, we can use that as collateral. If you default on the loan, then, it's covering that percentage that you would put down.
Okay.
So basically they take a second.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the proper terminology is. They take a second lien on it. Yeah.
Listen, if your bank is willing to do that and you've got enough equity and they can work it that way, absolutely. I'm going to guess that the first mortgage was also with the same bank?
Correct.
Yeah, there you go. That's why. Because now they're calculating it for themselves, right? If you had the mortgage with somebody else, they would have said no. But because it is the same bank, and because because what they're essentially doing is they're treating it as a portfolio, right? They're taking both properties, valuating them together, right? Seeing your total
loan to
LTVs,
value.
basically, right? Loan to values, and they're basing it on that. Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay.
Like I said, see, don't misunderstand. It's not that I'm not appreciative of all of those things. It's just that, to me, let's put it this way: they're the cherries on the top.
Yeah.
Right. The main thing is if I'm already getting that cash on cash return that I want, everything else is even better. That's how I look at it. Yeah.
And I mean, everybody. I mean,
Hey guys, real quick. Sorry to interrupt. I actually have to head out. It is bedtime for the baby, and yeah, I can hear him downstairs. That's normally not a good sign. So,
later, buddy.
Hey, thank you for everything, Mark. I appreciate it. It was good
buddy.
seeing all you guys. We'll catch you soon.
Well,
Love you, bud.
have a wonderful evening.
Yeah.
No, and Mark, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying at all. I told Jesse, I said I was super pumped about talking to you because I love other people's perspectives and outlooks on things. And honestly, you probably have more experience with this than me. So it's great to hear your thoughts and your perspectives. So
I appreciate the thought, but listen, for the same reason, I love listening to other people as well.
Awesome.
Mark, I think if there's a prospect of us four investing together, or us five, or however it shakes out, the only real meat on the bone is the terminal equity of whenever we set a date for, okay, let's hold all properties for 5 years, or under other circumstances, because otherwise us splitting 300 a month 5 ways is rather unappetizing. So this is really good to calculate the cash on cash, and I think that we are going to consider very heavily kind of a large portion of Adam's strategy in building up equity, having our renters build up our equity for us, and just factor in a very minimal appreciation. Say, okay, if we put $20,000 in this property today, when do we have $20,000 of value added onto that? Like, when do we have 40,000 in equity? Like, what is our doubling time? And little questions like that along the way.
Well, may I just point out one thing? See, we're looking at an example that's using a $200,000 purchase price. Right? Well, why don't we just multiply that by 10? right? I mean, between 5 people, it's or 6 people, it's not an unreasonable kind of thing. Not to mention that your cash out of pocket, actually, right? Investor cash at closing, 543,000. This is with the same leverage, all the same metrics, right? The only thing I did was I increased the gross rents by 10%. Right, I actually plugged in property management because if you're multiplying by 10, we're talking significantly more units, and you're looking at significantly higher incomes. The numbers get bigger, right? So if we just plug in bigger numbers, probably utilities will be at 5%. Vacancy actually would probably stay at around 3 to 4% with that many units. I just want to point out that you're not splitting $300.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
there's definitely, you multiply by 10, we're definitely, see, the reason I like the percentage part is because I understand what kind of return I'm getting on my money. And then I can compare it to other investments I have, right? Whether it's my hard money loans and I'm earning 15% on them, right? Versus a piece of real estate that's earning, let's say in this particular case, 28%, right? I can compare those two and know clearly what I'm doing. My point is that the numbers work regardless, right? Now I know I didn't increase some things here, right? Insurance on that kind of money is, most likely closer to $10,000, right?
you can
Property
just
taxes,
manipulate the percentage, and
right?
yeah,
Right.
you can just easily hand count that.
So there we go. So you're looking at more like at closer to 16.5%, right? With 7,500 a month, but still 7,500 a month divided by 5, that's still $1,500.
And what's and that's if we produced 550,000 down. So
As
that
an
would be
example,
like
yeah.
110 grand a person. We'd be getting 18,000 back. Yeah, that's a really good ROI.
Right. My point is, I'm not saying that we should immediately jump into buying a piece of real estate right now or look for it. My point is just to say, look, the point of this exercise was to look at a deal analyzer and, right, a project, basically figure out the numbers, how this works, and how you can use this for your purchases, right, for your investments. The other part of it is just for my personal approach is the percentages, and then the dollar amounts make sense, right? Now you're absolutely right. Too small a dollar amount, it just doesn't make sense, right? We're too lazy to work for $100 a month. That's just not appealing. But the numbers work out where you get bigger, right? You pool capital. You're not pooling it to buy a $260,000 building. You're pooling it to buy a $2.5 million building.
Mark,
Yeah.
here's a big question that I have, and something that I come across quite often. I look at properties all the time of all different types.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I come across often in our area specific is when you start getting into multi-units, and specifically huge multi-units, a lot of times you'll look at an ask price that is much greater than the appraised value of the building. Do you have any opposition to purchasing that if the cash still flows the way you want it to?
So appraised value goes, it's an interesting thing. Appraised value, if you're going up to 4 units, it appraises based on comps, sold comps. Once you cross the threshold to 5 and up, typically it's no longer based on sold comps. You're actually now looking at cap rates and performance. I don't really care, honestly. Again, the numbers either make sense for me or they don't. I don't care.
I just struggled with that a little bit, I think, because I was trying to say, okay, what is the bank going to require? And that's when they're going to require you to come with 30% more than likely.
Yeah.
Because like I had one, for instance, I was looking at, it was appraised at like 1.15, I think. Mm-hmm. And they wanted somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million for the place. But it would very, very easily cash flow, in my opinion. I think there were 18 townhome units in it.
Doesn't that go back to the whole market cap, where they can't appraise? Yeah. Somebody has to control that, where they can't overprice.
Well, they can overprice, right? In the end run, either nobody's going to buy, or it's a question of why and what's going on. If they're overvaluing, right? If the value is 1.15 and they're selling it for 2, why? That's the question I would ask.
Because it produces that type of rents?
Okay, then why is it only valued at 1.15?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. No, that's a great question. I mean, but I also wouldn't question that. I mean, I would, but if I were buying it, I mean,
Mhm.
that's what the tax is based on. So do you really want to poke the bear and make that number higher? I mean, it looks great for your
No.
portfolio and for the bank, but you're paying less tax.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It just, like I said, I would be concerned with why the numbers are the way they are. But
Sure.
look, in the end run, that's why I don't look at cap rates. That's why I'm personally interested in just cash on cash return and what that does. That's what
Cool.
works for me. Then again, when I buy a building for 1.15 million, maybe I'll look at it differently.
Mark, here's
Yes,
here's a more of a purchase strategy question. Do
sure.
you ever really like a property for an ancillary reason, and the numbers don't work based on the purchase price, and then you sometimes make a what people would call an insulting offer to make the numbers work? Like, do you ever go? Do you ever like if a property's listed for 200,000 and
Hmm.
the numbers work at 180? Do you go in at 180?
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
okay,
Numbers are numbers. I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
care what they're listing it for.
yeah.
And
The numbers
an offer, just an offer. They could always
and
decline it.
Yeah, some
yes,
people are very concerned about
uh,
their reputation with offers. It's
yeah,
weird.
and that's why you find a different agent to work with.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting thing about that also. Uh, don't forget, and this is another reason why I'm a big proponent personally, why I approach it as a cash on cash question, not as a cap rate or anything else, because in the end run, if the bank is only giving me, let's say, so let's say somebody else is able to buy it for $200,000 because they're not financing with a bank. They don't have those expenses, or there's some fee they're not paying and they're able to reduce their costs. So they're now able to bring that extra 20,000 to the table to buy the property. That's their personal scenario, right?
Yeah, very
If
good.
in my case, the best case scenario I can come up with personally is going to a bank and getting the bank to do, let's say, 75 to 80% of the purchase price, and I have to come up with the cash, and I simply cannot squeeze the numbers any other way, then I have no choice.
Yeah,
Right. So
good
for
point.
my numbers, it has to be what it has to be. And so, no, I don't have an issue with making an offer.
And honestly, from my limited experience, I'll agree with what you're saying. I always said, like, don't get emotionally attached to the property. Let the numbers work, you know? Because
Right.
if you find something you definitely want, you're going to overpay for it, and then shit doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
Mark, if we were to all get together and identify a property price range that works for us for our initial investment capacity as a group, if we were all sitting in even shares, how much would you recommend that we set aside for cash in the checking account to make sure that we never have to put money in the building? Like, what's a good operating account? Does it go
At least 2
per
months.
100,000? Oh, okay.
At least 2 months.
If not
Plus,
more during these
plus
crazy times, right?
10% of
Yeah.
repairs, he said earlier.
Right. Well, no, that's what I'm saying. 2 months. Literally, that, like, you take 2 months of your entire roll, right? Whatever your 2 month expense is.
Okay.
So look up, everything. I mean, run up, tally up. So this is the way I do it. I did it when I bought my properties. So my mortgage payment for 2 months, my expected repairs for 2 months. I mean, essentially every single dollar amount
It's
expense
really
that I
smart.
have for 2 months, that's what went in the bank day one.
Nice.
Right now, mind you, I'm not going to say that I didn't have more in reserve in my own personal, life, but that's my approach. Like day one at closing, I would set aside 2 months, and then hope and pray that nothing happens, catastrophic in those 2 months, right? As I'm building up the further reserves. And mind you, every single month, again, we're setting aside 10% of the rent for maintenance repairs, and for maintenance, whether we have it or not, it's set aside,
Mhm.
right? So because of it, uh, right? And on top of it, I'm calculating, let's say, vacancy of 8 to 10%. Now, if vacancy is lower, fantastic. That's money that actually got paid out that I, again, have in my own personal account now set aside, right?
Mhm.
Like available. So day one, 2 months. Like that's the math I would do. That any property where if we were to get together and do an investment, I would turn around and say, okay, how much, do we need to actually pay at closing in order to buy it? And on top of it, what would be the next 2 months of expenses? And that would be the total investment we would make.
Great. I have another question, if you don't mind. You're
Not at
okay
all.
on time, right?
Yes.
Okay. So from a very practical standpoint, if we had $50,000 sitting in a checking account, a lot of this information on the spreadsheet is very detailed and intimate. How are you procuring that information? It doesn't just pull off of Zillow. Are you asking the agent? If it's a single family home, say $200,000, how are you getting these finite details?
Which
to put
ones?
it into your,
What specifically?
like water and sewer, insurance, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So insurance is pretty easy. Insurance, you call up a local agent and you quote it.
Okay. And
right?
they don't
That's-
mind wasting their time, like, or
Jesse, I'll make it even easier. You literally call my mother and you say, what does it cost? And she says it's X.
Yeah.
Because she has a brokerage and she has 40 companies she writes for. So that's even easier. Yeah.
All right.
Nobody, Jesse, here's the thing. Nobody cares. Like, now, mind you, you have to understand, if I'm a complete tire kicker coming off of a street, right, that's one thing. On the other hand, at this point, when I call up my insurance agent, you have to understand, he's my insurance agent for my house, my rental properties. I've referred him to other people. When I call him up and I say, Avi, I need can you tell me roughly what this is going to be? Avi says, no problem, Mark, give me a minute. Right? So insurance, you price out. That's easy enough. Water and sewer, it's a ballpark guess, but again, you can guess it on your own expenses as well at home, right? What's your water bill? Also for rentals, now here's an interesting thing. For rentals, there is a lot of information such as market rents in an area. So let's say Connecticut, right? Again, I'll go to let's go to a market I had to expand into. So where I didn't have an established base and I had to do this. So when I went into North Carolina, how did I find this out? I went to the property management company. They'll have that statistic, right? The property management company I was talking to at the time, they had something like 1,500 doors under management. Okay.
Dang.
Yeah. Look, realistically, we have over 100 doors under management right now, right? So I'm starting to scratch that surface of knowing something. Not knowing everything, but knowing something, right? A company with 500 doors under management, they're going to know a lot. Like, that's your break point, right? That they know what they're doing, like, really well. So the company I was dealing with had something on the order of 1,500 doors. So when I asked them, what's your rent for a 1-bedroom apartment? Guess what? They know exactly what it is. They knew the low end, the high end, right? So I set it for $750. I knew it was $750. Water and sewer in Connecticut, I simply know it from my utility bills at this point, right? I saw it in my own property. I mean, I had to guesstimate in the beginning, but my guesstimate was, okay, what am I paying for water in an apartment of 3 people? Right? Okay, with 3 people in an apartment, I was paying for water, let's say on my own, right? X amount, $30 a month. Okay, if it's $30 a month for my apartment, it's going to be, $90 every quarter, right? It's, $360 for the year per apartment. So now calculate that into whatever the rent is, right? So if the rent is $1,200 for a month, right? That's 400 for the year, right? So you're starting to get a percentage ratio, right? So if I'm paying for water $1,200 and at the same time my rent is $14,000, right? That's almost 10%, 8%, just about.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
So you're getting a number, right? It's not that harsh, but you start getting that percentage. So some of these numbers, you plug in whatever you can, but property taxes, that's on the property card. That doesn't take much to find out. You go online for most places now in the US and you get the property tax data that way. So you find out the property tax online, you get insurance quotes from your agent. And by the way, when you're buying the property, you can ask them, what's their insurance? They'll tell you what their price is, right? A lot of these expenses, the seller will tell you a lot of these numbers as well.
When you can really ask them the sewer and water too. I mean, if there's
Yes.
currently a rental, you can just ask them what, like I've had people ask me who are tenants coming in who paid and they said, do you have any clue what you're going to be? And I just happened to pay it's a weird situation, but I have Army War College who I know are 100% going to pay me. So I paid the utilities and then they reimburse me.
Yep.
So I just happen to have spreadsheets from the last 4 years of all of them. So here's what it's going to cost you.
Right.
You know, so a lot of times people have that information.
Yep. Vacancy, you're going to find out about your market. So we're pulling data, let's put it this way. We're pulling data from different places. A bank will price out, you know, you can call up a bank and ask them what the current 30-year, you know, mortgage rates are for a 1 to 4 unit rental property. 5 units and up, now you have to go commercial. Not every bank will do it. And, you know, that's where you're looking for, you know, lenders who will actually do that kind of loan, right? So you pull bank data, you're pulling from banks, or go online and they have quotes. Then, as we said, rents, you're going to have market rents available as market data online, or you could go on Zillow, or you can talk to the broker, right? Or the property management company. So let's just start with property management company. Vacancy, they'll tell you as well. So the one in North Carolina told me it was running about 0 to 3, so I plugged in 3 just to be on the safe side. Insurance, right? We said that that's a quote from your insurance agent. Property management, again, that same property management company is telling you what they're doing, right? They're telling you what they charge. Water, sewer, we discussed. Repairs and maintenance. That's a number that I worked out on my own.
Yeah.
It's what works for me. I figured it this way. Some amount will go away every month for, you know, incidentals, and some amount I want to set aside for CapEx. So I just figured 10%. And
so
it works.
If you can collect all this information, quote unquote, from your laptop, I mean, you can basically shop around for buildings all over the country based on your investment strategy. It doesn't have to be under your thumb in your hometown.
Correct.
Okay, so our location should be more dependent on our strategy versus how well someone knows it.
Well, and
do you go and visit all of your property in North Carolina? Do you actually visit it, or you just take the property company take it?
So let me tell you the key lesson, okay? And this is one of the big takeaways I've had from doing all of this is you must have boots on the ground. At the time, and so
say that again. I'm sorry.
You must have what's called boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Okay. You must have somebody you trust locally that can be your eyes. Whether
not just the property management company.
Not just the property management company.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my advice. Okay. There are people who have obviously properties all over the country without it. I'm not a fan. You want somebody that's your representative, that's your eyes to be available.
To make sure that boiler did explode and they're not just telling you it did to charge you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my advice. So
that's what Jesse would do.
So the way
guess who just bought a house in Hawaii?
Yeah. the way I would say, look, let's take away the boots on the ground for a second. The way I would start is obviously the market. You want market metrics, right? You want the market where the rentals are good, right? It's a good price. There's good foundational numbers for it, right? People are moving into that market. There's jobs. And by the way, the first and foremost and most important thing is jobs. It's nothing else. Yeah. Okay? Because if somebody can't pay the rent, guess what? They're not staying. So the first thing is jobs. And so you want to know, where are you going, right? Is there a new Amazon distribution center locally? Is there a port, right? I think, Memphis is really hot because of this. They've got like FedEx plus the port there, right? As an example. So you want the underlying economic factors to be huge, right? Then after that, you look at the price point, right? Economic price, there's a port in New York, there's jobs in New York, there's everything in New York, and there's insane pricing in New York. And on top of it, you want to look at the tenant laws, landlord tenant laws, because they're hugely different state by state, with New York and California probably being one extreme and Texas being the other, and everything else is in between. So you want to look at economic basis, you want to look at then, so you want to look at jobs and the economics of it. You want to look at tenant landlord laws, and then you look at price point. right? A good deal is a good deal. And if you have to figure out how to finance it, that's a different question. But you start with good numbers and go from there. Now, boots on
Hey,
the
Mark,
ground is a question. Yeah. Yeah. Go for it.
can I ask you one too?
Sure.
How do you have your businesses set up or classified? Like, are they an LLC or your properties?
LLCs.
There's
So they're pass through
LLCs.
LLCs. Now here's what happens. I have a property management company that's an active LLC, right? That's an active business. I think it's
Okay.
S corp at this point. So that's the active business. Now all of the rentals are in their own because the rentals are enough to carry the burden of an LLC, right? There's overhead. You have to pay filings every year. You have to do taxes for each LLC. You have to keep the books. So for a single family house, I wouldn't separate each house into an LLC. I would probably aggregate 4 houses into one, right? 3 to 4
Yeah.
houses, but you don't want to get it too fat either. But my buildings are, each one is in its own LLC, okay? And they're a passive LLC, and part of the expenses every month is the management fee to my active company. So my
Okay.
active company is managing the properties, collecting the 10% from the income. That then goes to the, and mind you, my active LLC, right? It has its own expenses as well. We're paying virtual assistants, right? We're paying for some maintenance items. Same thing. It's a business in and of itself, right? It manages not just my properties, but other people's properties. So the properties are in passive LLC, pass-through LLCs, right, which are Schedule C for me personally, right, the income from it.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there's a management fee that goes over to the management company that then comes to me as an active income, right, for my participation in an active LLC for whatever I do there.
So all of these things are helping you with tax consequences.
Yes, they are,
I
but
mean,
I mean, it's
seriously,
all
and then
within,
it's a layer, and then
not
it's a layer of protection also. I mean, right?
right.
That's what my attorney yelled at me about, and I started this without knowing as much as I should, and I still don't know as much as I should. But he basically screamed at me. He said, "You should have these places in different LLCs." He said, "God forbid, you do something and somebody sues you, all this shit's in your name."
Absolutely.
And now I have to look at it, but now you're going to have to pay. Now you're going to have to pay basically the same as the closing cost again to put them into an LLC, from what I'm reading.
Oh, huh.
So, I mean, you're going to kind of get burned on that, and I don't know if I want to take that jump right now or look at it later.
Well, I'll give you 2 answers to that. So answer number 1 is well, first of all, moving them into an LLC right now is also problematic because you now have a mortgage.
Okay.
And your bank lent to you. So if you were to move the properties, it's now right? It's now a different borrower. So now it's what's called the due on sale clause. So if you were to just literally to move the property, right, quit claim it or whatever else into an LLC, well, guess what? The bank can now show up and say, excuse me, you sold the property, you have to pay us back, right?
So if I do it as I pay them off, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You could refinance the mortgage. So for example, if you were to refinance the mortgage right now, and to pull out equity, then yes, at closing, you could move it into an LLC.
Yeah, that seems the best option.
But the question there is, will that bank lend to an LLC? Because that's a separate question, right?
Yeah.
So you have to find out from them. But there is another way to do this. What you could do is drop it into a land trust. Now, I'm not a specialist on this. It's something I've heard, I've heard it repeatedly, but I don't do this I've never done it, and I don't know it enough to be an authority on it. All I can tell you is you move it into a land trust, which then creates kind of the same barrier of protection as moving it into an LLC. You essentially separate yourself away from the asset.
And do you have to do a separate trust for all of them, do you think? Or is that something that you could put all of them into the land trust?
A land trust is a one-time fee, so you could do it for each property individually so that they're separated from each other as well.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. And the other one, real quick, if I may,
Mhm.
I was reading a little bit about this. Obviously, this is hopefully a once in a lifetime thing that we're going through right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on this earlier, forbearance.
Mm-hmm.
So I was reading some literature on this. Is it correct to say that a forbearance? So if you say you're going to make an exception for your tenant and give them a forbearance, okay, it goes on for 3 months.
Yeah.
And it's $1,200 a month. Then at the conclusion of that forbearance, you're saying $3,600 is due, and they say we can't pay it, and they say, okay, can we spread it over 12 months? Is that accurate, or are you totally just giving them a pass?
No, I'm not giving them a pass because, well, first of all, I don't know enough
They
about
live
it right now. So let me tell you, this is all so fresh. Even I don't have answers on it. Plus, I have other people handling this more closely than I am. But
Okay.
I'll give you some rough answers on this. You can't give them a pass because nobody's going to give you a pass on your debt service, right?
Correct.
Bank's not giving you a pass. The government's not giving you a pass on property taxes, right? You still
Yep.
have the same expenses. You can't get around that. That's the problem, right? So you can't just forgive it.
Yeah.
You have to recoup it. Now you're absolutely right that you can't. And this is where a lot of the from everybody that's talking about this right now, everybody's saying the same thing. Be considerate, be compassionate, understand what's going on, and we do understand what's going on. So it's get ahead of it and basically, yes, spread it out over time. That's what that's what ends up needing to be done.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I'll throw one out to you since you've been so gracious and told me a bunch of things.
Sure.
This is something I've done that a lot of people will probably make fun of, but I think it pays dividends.
Mm-hmm.
When I have really good tenants, like I do now in all of my places, I'll do something like drop them a gift card at Christmas time and a note just thanking them.
Yep.
And I think it pays dividends because all of my tenants right now, a couple of them are out of jobs and they still pay me.
So
it's
here's
just little things like that.
nothing funny about it. I had a company, a huge company down in Jacksonville, JWB, Jacksonville Wealth Builders. So they're a huge property management company down in Jacksonville, Florida. And I had a chat with them, and that was one of their suggestions also. So you're not the only one
Nice.
doing it. I mean, you're on the right path, and that's exactly it.
Yeah, I drop a few $100s around Christmas. Give them $100
Yep.
gift card, take your wife out to eat.
Yep.
And people eat it up. They love it.
Yeah, absolutely.